All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for this science seminar from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm broadcasting today, and pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So it is our real pleasure today to welcome Dr. Phillip Kodela, who's been at the gardens in Sydney for a really long time, before most of us were. Phillip just told me he's actually started at the gardens in Sydney in 1990. But for a few years now, he has moved to Canberra, where he's currently leading the Flora of Australia. So we're really pleased, Phillip, to hear about this work. And there will be a 30-minute talk. And for anyone wishing to ask some questions, please stay on, and you can ask them in the chat or directly to Phillip at the end of this talk. All right, off to you, Phillip.
Okay, hello everyone. It was lovely chatting to a few of you earlier on. Any apologies that you may have seen some of these slides, because one of my colleagues who used to work here, called Perry Bolton, she did visit you guys a few years ago, mostly promoting the bryophytes going onto the platform. So she gave a similar talk at the time, so you'll see a few slides there. Because some people are new to ABRS, I thought I'd keep in a few slides explaining what the Australian Biological Resources Study is for a few people who are new to that. And it sort of comes from a talk we also give to the interns here in Canberra at the herbarium, so they understand what ABRS does, and the Flora of Australia being one of our main components. Okay, so now I have to. So, ABRS, you can see that we have quite a few different aims, and we've been around since 1973 working on the Australian taxonomy and with the research community. We're meant to provide a national leadership and to facilitate and support basically taxonomy, which is the discovery, naming and classification of Australia's biodiversity. And we have various priorities where we broker taxonomy, we promote the importance of taxonomy, try to increase the understanding to our government departments and to the public and various stakeholders. And we provide a lot of taxonomic information to the community. And we want to build up that capacity, research capacity in taxonomy, both in flora and fauna. And most of you would have known about the decadal plan, and you'll see that ABRS is mentioned quite a bit. A lot of our roles are incorporated in the decadal plan, which Taxonomy Australia is taking a lead on now. Okay, so what is taxonomy? I won't have to read that out to most of you because I'm speaking to a lot of taxonomists. So just how important it is to the community is that it's the building block to our communication. Understanding our biodiversity then lets us, helps us manage that biodiversity, and you'll all be familiar with how important that is, especially whenever we find new species and the like. It's very important for looking at nature reserves, and if there's any sort of developments on a site, it's good to understand the building blocks of what's out there in the landscape. So we achieve those goals basically through having lots of identification tools. They can be books or lucid identification key. We have we support different. We give out a lot of advice on scientific names to the community and to government departments. We provide grants. We're one of the few taxonomic organisations that provide grants for taxonomic research and development. And probably some of you have heard of Bush Blitz, and I know that New South Wales, you guys have gone out on Bush Blitz field trips. These are just some of the products, just to show you it's an array of, we've done hard copy books in the past. A lot of people there at New South Wales authors and editors of the various products that have been produced here at ABRS, and it's got a long history. And one of the most recent books that came out not long ago was on slime molds. And you've been listening to ABC radio lately, slime mold seems to be on every few days. There's someone being interviewed, and Robin Williams mentioned it the other day. So slime molds is, and I still remember we were all out there looking for slime molds some years ago, and some of you were there in the herbarium will remember that, you know, we all had a hunt for slime molds in our backyards at one stage. So it's good to see them, that interest in such a group of plants. And even citizen science is catching on with school groups looking out for slime molds now. A lot of you may not be aware that we work on SPRAT, the Species Profiles and Threatened Species Database. One of my colleagues, Annabelle Wheeler, she spends a fair bit of time working on the SPRAT database. And on that database, you'll find useful links to management plans, to the different listings. It's meant to incorporate the state and territory conservation codes as well as the national one. We'd like to automate that a little bit more into the Flora. I know that you've got an automatic link in PlantNet, which is very useful. The main thing with these products is to make sure that you have to try and keep up to date with them as they change over time. So here's our Bush Blitz component. You can see that they go all over the country. Lots of interesting sites that may not have been explored a lot. And one of the good things that's been coming out of those programs are the plant specimens that have been collected. And again, there was one that Richard Jobson had collected, which we then described as a new record in New South Wales. So you just don't know what you might find when you go on these trips. Also extensions of range, and it's a very useful thing taking taxonomy to the community. So one of the main things we do, of course, is grants, and the next grant round will be open later in October, a bit earlier this year, and it has various targets to understand taxonomy, but also maybe products that help understand biodiversity and building our taxonomy capacity. And that's open to lots of different people, post-grads and the like. Now, this is where I come in with the Flora of Australia, which I'm to talk about today, which is to do with the just one of our databases. We also have the Australian Faunal Directory. It's very interesting not being a fauna person. I keep joking about how plants came first, but anyway, they take that okay. But the Fauna Directory is very important to the zoological community because it's a place they can go to, but they don't have a consensus census like we do with plants. And I think we're very lucky to have a plant census, the Australian Plant Census, because it does give us a place to go. And we don't seem to, I mean, we can disagree and have synonymy, but from what I can see and hear in meetings about fauna issues, we're very lucky that in the botanical community, we have organised that census. So you can always have a name to go to and use synonymy if you wish not to use that name, but at least you've got a good basis there. And I did go to a taxonomy meeting, database meeting at the Shine Dome a couple of years ago, and it was asked of the fauna people whether they would ever have such a thing as the Australian Plant Census. And there was a categorical outright no, they would never do it. So if you hadn't heard that. The other thing that we look out for is the National Species List. And it's very important that that incorporates the APNI and the APC. And there's a lot of work going in that to, as you know, it's mostly concentrated on vascular plants to date, but there are plans to make it grow, and there's a lot of work going into the National Species List to incorporate all organisms, whether it's different groups of plants like bryophytes and algae, but it's also, it's got its vision to include the fauna. And of course, this will then be very much appreciated by ALA. So with the eFlora, that's of course what I'm going to be talking about today, which is our latest incarnation of the Flora of Australia. And of course, bryophytes is chasing up behind it very quickly now. We are going into that. So just a little bit of the history of the flora. You probably all know our green and gold series, well used at New South Wales. That's been going for a long time. 1981, there were to be 60 volumes. They got about halfway through. They stopped production in 2015 and went into the electronic version. So basically there was that first volume number 1, Flora of Australia, in 1981. That was revised in 1999. There's some good essays in there about biogeography of the Australian flora. There's quite a few introductory essays on biogeography, paleobotany, the vegetation types in Australia. So it's very useful still to go to those original volumes, volume 1, as a background on the Australian flora and how the flora fits in with that. Now, this is the old Flora Online. Basically, at one stage, they put the data that's in the book volumes into this Australian Flora Online. Unfortunately, it's now disconnected. It had this very useful search engine. We don't know if it's going back online, but now this has been superseded by the eFlora. So just to let you know, if any of you have been using this particular database, it's no longer connected. But we do have, if you go to our web pages, you will see that the different volumes are now in the process of being PDF'd. So we've got some of them available as PDFs, which is very useful because you can actually copy and paste sections if you were going to adapt them for other floras. I'm currently working with John Busby here, adapting the island floras into the profiles on the platform, the eFlora. So there's quite a few books that are now PDFs, and otherwise there's a link on this page to go directly to the Flora of Australia. If you don't do it via the URL, you can go via this page. So there are quite a lot of information on our web pages here at ABRS. Just to let you know that the Australian Botanic Garden here has quite a lot of useful web pages on different plant groups, and they still exist. We're not taking these off. They're still part of the Botanic Gardens here, ANBG. And Australian mosses online are staying for now. There's a lot of good information on there, but that will slowly be incorporated into the Flora version of the bryophytes of Australia. But this site still exists on the ANBG site. So the eFlora, why did we go to an eFlora? Well, you can imagine the benefits the same as PlantNet. You can update information live. It's not a static volume anymore. It means that we can now publish sections. We don't have to wait for a whole treatment to be available to publish a book form. So this is very useful. We can, at one stage, we started by putting in missing family profiles, and then you can put in different genus treatments under that. So it's a very useful way to now manage the database. And this was launched in November 2017. And it was launched basically starting off by loading all the data from the hard copy volumes. And you can imagine there's a lot of work now updating the information from those volumes, but that's how it started, plus loading some new treatments. And of course, there's some back manuscripts that hadn't been published in the books, and slowly some of them are being updated and loaded as well. So the good thing about it is that we can get a flow of data going in here, and you can create subsets. Just to let you know also that the eFlora is it's a compilation of lots of different people's work. Australian Biological Resources, it's a joint project that's been working with this Atlas of Living Australia, ALA, who did the technical build, plus Char's been involved, and plus of all you guys, the taxonomists in Australia and New Zealand. Without the botanical community to provide contribution and editing and reviewing, there would be no Flora. So that's where you come in, and we really appreciate that input. And a lot of you who are watching this seminar have been involved with the Flora of Australia for a very long time, so since the 1980s. So this is nothing new to you. It's just now in an eFlora format. Now, just to let you know that we now treat the Flora as a set of profiles, and ALA supports them on their platform, and these are called collections, not as in like a specimen collection, but these are called collections, and you can see that the Flora of Australia is just one of the collections of 4 that currently sit on ALA's profile site. So there's the bryophytes of Australia, and there's also the weeds people, and there's an ethnobotany type group as well. So you could basically, if you wanted to create frogs of Australia or fungi of Australia, a collection could be created and curated on one of these profile sites. It would just be given a collection name, as you can see there. So this is the front page. If you went into the home page of the Flora, again, I'll emphasize it's a joint project that's involved CHAR, and we've had advisory committees and a working group, and lots of different contributors. Now on this page, you'll see that we give an introduction, and on the far right side, I maintain the recent updates, and which may be new treatments or revised treatments. Eventually, we're going to have to try and put that into some sort of file where it'd be easier to search and date the publication date of these particular groups of plants. So getting a little bit unwieldy keeping it this way, but there is a place to go. And if you read the Australian Systematic Botany newsletter, I also maintain the updates in there quarterly each quarter. So just to let you know, show you that the bryophytes is also happening, but I'm going to concentrate on the vascular plant site today. And eventually this could all be combined into Flora of Australia, because I mean, the bryophytes are still part of the Flora of Australia. It's just the way that it started out as separate collections, and I'll stay that way for a while now. So I think the innovative side of the Flora, which is what Perry would have talked to the herbarium about a couple of years ago, was the innovative side was that it was meant to be interactive, and an integration where you're automatically linking data and information from other web resource sites. So basically, you'll have your taxon profile. So each rank of a plant group is going to have its own profile. So there'll be a family profile, a genus profile, and each of the species or subspecies or varieties will all have their own individual profile on this profiles database on the platform. And within that then feeds in information from other resources. So the names are coming from the National Species List. Currently, we're stuck with the APC names, and that's to do with the way ALA creates the names and matches the names. It's causing a few issues, which I'll talk about a bit later on. The distribution maps have been created and coming out of the AVH data. Then we've got the images are coming in from APII, the Australian Plant Image Index. The keys are coming from Keybase, which has been maintained on the Melbourne Botanic Garden site. And then we get some information also from ALA. So there's different ways you can browse the Flora. You can use the search function by scientific name, common name, or any text that may be in there. There's also the browse function, which is very useful because it'll even find names that are maybe not matching correctly in the search function. You can go through the different search engines. As I said, you can go via the key. You're rarely going to use the identify feature to start with if you're going at that level. But once you're in a profile, you could use that for, say, species within genus or genus within family. There are filters. Currently, we only have the ABRS regions. IBRA regions, I mean. Here you can see the IBRA regions, but it would be nice to develop that further so that we can have polygons or other regions similar to what PlantNet does. It is on the cards as a future development. When we talk to ALA, we have to talk about bugs versus enhancements. So you'll all know, anyone who's worked on the Flora platform will know that we've had quite a few bugs in the recent past that have been ironed out slowly. But I have a big page of enhancements I would like. So here's a typical page, Zyuria in Rutaceae, where you'll have the different feature. It'll be similar to any Flora, where you'll have the description, the phenology, the status, the distribution, and all sorts of notes. And as I said, in that profile on the Zyuria arborescens, it's going to pull in the data from those different web resources. So you'll have the description, which we have to, we mostly copy and paste into that from Word documents and the like. We do automatically load data sometimes from ALA, but we don't have the luxury of having access to the back end of the database similar to what PlantNet has with EMU. Again, a future development where we'd like to have a little bit more control. We will be loading the Euclid data from the most recent version of Euclid to update the eucalyptus treatment. So that's something in the pipeline. So as I said, the taxonomy nomenclature is coming from the NSL and it's automatically fed into the profile, but we don't discourage if a contributor wants to write nomenclature and information on types. We do provide fields so they can provide more details than what you're going to see in APNI or IPNI, especially for researchers gone to a lot of work to work out synonymy and residual syntypes and things that may not be found in APNI. We do provide that field for more complex nomenclature. So as I said, it's basically coming from the NSL for now. Here's the photo. We are looking at ways to manage the photos a bit better, finding a new website. It's also been put to us that we should be out there advertising where we still need photos and sharing this data a bit more. So if there was a place where both professional botanists and community members could go to and see where we're still missing photos of a lot of taxa, as you all know, a photo explains a million words. They're so useful, and line drawings and the like. If we had a site that people could go to where there were listing missing images, people could look out for them next time they're going on a field trip to a particular area, or even the common things. There's often we're missing part of the reproductive part. We may have flowers but not fruits, for instance. So it's a very useful, that would be a useful thing to do in the future. When we add photos, we can control which photo we would like at the front of the profile. I think it's good the way PlantNet tries to have a photo of habitat, habit, flowers, fruits, and the like, and that would be nice to sort of get that on the front page of the Flora profiles as well. Another thing in my enhancement list. So distribution maps. You may have seen that I know Marco would have been getting emails from John Busby. He was going through old issues of the Flora of Australia and he was finding all these anomalies and whether it's a geocode error or like, but we all know the best place to fix a geocode error or anomaly is to go back to the original database. We can filter the maps, but you can all imagine the danger of you could create a nice map and filter it, and you can create a static map and attach it to the Flora of Australia, and then that's as of that day. But the idea was that you could maintain up-to-date records and extensions of range and the like in the future by having a live map that takes records straight from the AVH. But as you can imagine, there's lots of problems there where there's always going to be a collection that hasn't been updated with a revision, and that's always going to lag behind. But why it's best not to use location filters permanently on a map. Let's say what happens in ACT, you're often going to get a dot for a southwest Western Australian endemic in Canberra because something's jumped the fence onto Black Mountain and become naturalised, and it's a native from southwest Western Australia. If you block off New South Wales and filter that out of the distribution map for that Western Australian species, it means in the future, if one of those plants jumps the fence and becomes naturalised in Black Mountain, it's not going to show on the map. So the most ideal thing is to fix things up at the source database. These is about the keys. The good thing about the keys, I don't know, many of you would have used Keybase. It's been very useful, and I've been going in there a fair bit. You can edit the keys once they're in there as well. And I did recently add a key that was donated on Plantago, and I guess Barbara and I'll be watching that one over time with the compiler of that key. And it's just useful having that being managed by people in Melbourne. Now, some of the interesting things for those of you who are not taxonomists in the herbarium, but maybe in education, or if you're going to give a talk about a weed or something, there are lots of interesting facts and figures that you can get out of the Flora of Australia. And now that we're not confined to the limitations of word spacing, I mean, how many words we can put in a book version, we're now free to, with space on an electronic profile, you can see we can add a lot more information. And these are just a few little interesting facts. I published a little paper with Barbara Briggs, and some of these have come from that little paper we put into a horticultural journal, just so that people outside the taxonomic community realise that the Flora of Australia is available for different stakeholders, and you'll get interesting things, say, on weeds. People probably don't know that there are native species of rice, Ariza, in Australia. In fact, there's 4 species, and they're currently being experimented as a crop in Australia, but they've been used for some time. Australiensis was used in breeding programs in India to toughen the genetic crops to be a little bit more drought resistant, because the Australian rice is used to getting periods of drought and not always inundated. So rice has been used from the Australian point of view for some time, but now they're actually looking at natives as a crop in their own right. And it's quite fascinating, that parasitic plant that's like an alien coming out of the stems. Citrus, again, people probably don't realise that we have 6 species in Australia. We have more species on our continent than anywhere else. Of course, you've got a lot of those cultivars and crosses, and some of them would have originated or did originate in China and northern India. But Australia actually, since they put them all back into citrus, there were different genera for a while. We have the largest number of species, and nothing nicer than getting the pink one and putting that in your gin and tonic at a nice cocktail party. And very impressive if you want to impress your guests. And yeah, and you all know my acacia, and it's the largest vascular plant group in Australia, of genus, I mean, not group. Again, this is just to emphasize that in the flora that you can put lots of information that you may not have had room for in the book. And just for this example for Victoria, you can write a bit more about the uses. And, you know, I've even put a paragraph in there. That's one of the wattle seeds that's used for food and human consumption as a bush tucker. And, you know, you use it to flavour ice creams and desserts, or making coffee, even a bit there about medicinal uses. And you don't have to write a lot, as long the main thing is that you put in the reference for people to go to, or the link. Here I've even mentioned how it features on the $10 banknote. And then, of course, ethnobotany we're also promoting. Of course, the weed people are going to be interested. They have their own weed site, but they were interested in using our descriptions in the future or linking across. So this is just asparagus, asparagoides, one of the weeds of national significance. And that's only part of the bibliography. Some people might think we're going a bit too far, but if you needed a source, a reference to go to on a particular group of weeds, you just might find it in the Flora of Australia now, which you may not have done in the past, but now you could go there, and sometimes there's going to be quite an extensive list of references to go to. This is me playing around a little bit, some photos of the use of Oryza sativa, and you can see your imagination can go wild now because you've got room to put lots more information and photos that may be of interest to the public. And again, this is outside of what the traditional flora would have done, but now we have room for putting in this sort of details. And last example to show you again, avocado. People may not realize some of the varieties are actually poisonous to animals if they eat them. And of course, anyone who's had Garcinia mangostana, the mangosteen, it's got to be one of the favorite fruits that I've had when I've traveled in Southeast Asia. And yeah, so you can do this sort of thing now in the flora. Again, now viola, what we're also promoting is that now we can use some sort of diagnostic photos as well. In this particular species, this exotic or naturalized viola that's common from the gardens is distinguished by having those little deflexed minute hairs on the petiole of the leaf, and it's got quite a pronounced spur at the back of the flower. And the other thing we now promote a lot is taxonomic notes, especially when a group of plants is in flux, where we know there's revisions going on in that particular plant group. We're not restricted. We can only write in the flora what we know up to date, but we can use taxonomic notes to write about changes or where further investigation is required. And it's a very useful site, especially with all that phylogenetic work coming out these days. It's important that we write an explanation why this particular group of plants has moved from, say, recently I'm looking at Celtis, moved from Ulmaceae to the cannabis family. So it's good that you can put those references and explanations into your taxonomic notes. So just for those who are interested in ever doing flora treatments or contributions, if you haven't done one before, especially on the eFlora, there is a place to go to help users and contributors, whether you're a reviewer or an author. You just go to the help sites, and there you'll find different contributor guidelines, whether it's similar to a book format, but there's also a lot of help pages and how-to guides that were all created. So you just have to go to this particular site and you'll find all your different how-to guides. And it's actually very easy to use. You don't need to know HTML or any of those computer languages. On the top of each field in the profile, there's a format bar, and you can use it similar to when you use a Word document. You can highlight, you can underline, you can italicize by just using this little format bar that occurs above each of the fields in the profiles. So where we're moving, we've got about 16,500 to 17,000 taxon profiles loaded to date. Most of these came from the book. A lot of the new treatments have been loaded, and as I said, we've currently I'm publishing some of Russell's and Karen's and Jeremy Brewer's Cyperaceae are being loaded. Some of the new GINA treatments, just finishing one off today. Barbara's been very busy with Restinaceae and Nafriaceae. We just put on Mordinaceae. So new treatments are going on all the time. And I've got Ian Telford sending things across now. We've also got treatments that were arranged for the hard copy volumes, but a lot of that manuscript is now out of date. So it does require going through and I have worked on a few of the little pea families, pea genera, and there are quite a bit on file. Now, updating existing treatments, the legacy data that was loaded from the volumes, a lot of that is really out of date. You can imagine something that was done in the 1980s. It's hard to believe is now 40 years ago. And yes, there's a lot of revisions done, and we can always, we always appreciate people assisting with any updates of the existing data. I do have some workarounds to sometimes create tentative profiles where at least people can see that that species exists, and I can point them to the revision paper where they'll find the description and the keys. So there are ways to do that, and we're very fortunate to have John Busby, who some of you may know has done some quite a bit of biosystematic type of work in bioinformatics in the past, and he's going through cover to cover with volumes, checking them against APC and providing me with lists of where updates are required, and he's reformatting the profiles as he goes through. So if there's any missing italics or the like, he's working his way through. But yes, that's a big job, is to update, and we have done that with some major families like Violaceae, Urticaceae, you'll find, and I'm going through Ananaceae. So we are fixing them up as we can. So the profiles, we're still looking at enhancements and development. We would like more search and reporting functionality. We're looking for funds. Some of you will know we've had problems with the functionality of the platform in the last couple of years, and we are looking into how we could enhance and improve the platform, and we may even move into a new site altogether, depending on how we could get funding for that. Of course, we always want to put new collections on, and we have a working group that talks about sharing of data. We all know that there's a lack of resources, and we all, whether it's a botanist or the more we can share resources, and that between the herbaria, we can adapt flora treatments and share the data that's on the cards. And we have a working group that is in discussion on how we could best share data and how we then present that data. We collaborate with the World Flora Online. We are expected to provide treatments, and we have started doing that with the endemic groups of plants. We have sent that data to the World Flora Online. We would like to be able to incorporate alternative taxonomic backgrounds like phylogenetic classifications and the like. That's on the cards as a possibility. We would like to be able to incorporate other sorts of keys like lucid keys, or at least links to the relevant resources on our site. And of course, we would like to improve the capture of images and managing it on the system a bit better. So that's about all. So I'll probably take questions now.